So unusually, I'm actually going to start with logging in. So if you need to get into IQ quickly, one of the things you can do, the splash screen first appears, is you can actually press F8. And doing that means that you actually bypass loading control desks. So if you do need to get in to quickly check something, that's a good way of speeding that process up. So once we're in, what I do encourage you to do is look at our previous webinar on ribbon commands. So if you want to create an optimized environment like this, where you kind of tailor the commands to your role, then that webinar should help you out. So I'll start with a few tips around general customization. So we did mention in the ribbon command webinar that you could have embedded web pages like this. So some of the things people are doing with this are, embedding training material, links to company intranet, even training videos. So it's a good way of kind of bringing together all your IQ related collateral into one place. Once you've got the environment the way you want it, there's a few more things we can do to optimize it. So along with your ribbon commands here, if there's things that you do quite regularly, then you can actually right click and add to a quick access toolbar. So see that goes to the top there? So I can add all my common views to there. In fact, in this case, we'll add company settings because I'm going to be in there quite often today. Okay. As far as window management goes, if I load a couple of control desks, so you'll have seen in the past that we can actually pick these up and undock. But then if you hold the key and double click on the header again, it's quicker than actually doing the drag back into place. Another thing we can do here is we can actually hide the whole bar. Not many people know about. So if I do Control and F1, it quickly minimizes it. So if I roll commands, I could have a very large workspace there with my commands in the quick access toolbar at the top and my ribbon minimized. A couple of little shortcuts people don't know about is if I go to my customers view, for example. Here we have our free text search, and we can also do what we call item free text search as well. So F4 does your free text search, but not many people know that you do Shift F4 to access your item search. So in this case, that would search things like contacts as well as my customers. You'll have seen in the past as well that we can actually customize the backdrop here with a backdrop image for your company logo. But people can often do this as well by branch. So we've added a new option by branch to change that backdrop. So if you've got a different branding per branch or a different identity, then that can vary based on the logged in branch as well. On the side here, we've got our user dashboard. So you'll have seen this in the past. Now, for some users, you might not want this at all. So we've added on the roles. If we go to my setup here and go to roles and just edit my current role here. So there is an option to completely enable or disable this user dashboard. Okay. Another thing you can actually do here is you can actually have a custom dashboard at the side. So this has been around for a while, but there's something called a My Dashboard configuration. So if I just configure this one here, you can actually selectively hide and show various elements of that dashboard at the side. Okay, we saw on one of the previous webinars, we can also enable user and password changing here. So they're just simple company settings. If I go into my company settings here, for user, you'll see here we've got user switching and user password changing. So you can switch those on and off, and that's what makes those appear in that bottom section there. People in recent release as well, so like customers, and we go into our property chooser to add columns, and we go down to say our sales rep, and then maybe object within there, so current period target, for example. And what we added a few releases ago was this breadcrumb tray at the top. So this makes it really easy for you to jump back to any level within this object. So if I want to go right back to the top level, I can click customer, which I can do here. That's just a quicker way of navigating that property chooser. Another thing we've done is in this branch selection at the bottom here. So that's the typical way you might select a branch, but if you've got a lot of branches, that's not the best way of accessing it. So what we can do is set up a threshold where if it goes over a certain number of branches, you get a different presentation there. So if I go back into my company setting here, branch list threshold, okay, now I can actually set that to say 10. And what happens then is if I've got more than 10 branches, go to this element here, what it does is it pops up a change branch screen. Okay, so for some of our users with larger branch counts, that might be a better way of selecting branches. Another thing we can do is if you don't use the kind of IQ dashboards within here, you can actually turn this off completely now as well. So that's in your security policy. So under module settings, so if you go to my security policy here, and we just take my standard one. And that IQ menu off at the side. Okay. So what we're trying to do here is minimal distraction-free and very focused environment for your users. So a combination of all those options lets you achieve that. So let's look at things like lists now. So if I go to, say, my sales order list here, so there's a few things we can configure in your list. So firstly, the commands. So the number of commands you see at the top here are governed by a system option called list command overflow threshold. It's a bit of a mouthful. Mine's set to 14, so I get 14 along here, and then everything else goes into the overflow menu, as you know. But what you can also do now is you can actually group these commands. So, if I want things to do with delivery, I can have them grouped there, pricing here, for example. So it makes you a much more optimized way of accessing the things you do regularly, okay? And the way that's set is in your security policy for the view. So it just takes a couple of seconds to load the first time. Okay, there's a property called grouping path override. So if you look down my list here, you'll see, okay? And the other thing while we're in here is this accessibility level. So the ones I want to have as a priority, I would set to be high. Okay, and then for organizing those commands within the views. So another thing we get asked in previous webinars is how do we add this preview pane at the bottom? Okay, so it's quite easy to do. So if I go into my sales invoices here, yeah, so as we can add what's called the items grid onto the screen here. And if you watch now, just drag, okay, and then maybe I'll add a splitter bar as well, so drag it around. I can just go in between there, add columns, and then we're adding columns here from my sales invoice line. So we might have line number, you might want the product code, you might want the description, quantity, oops, and maybe the selling units, okay? So that's how you build what we call a preview pane at the bottom. And of course, don't forget to save your layout when you've done this, but that's what we do there. Now these can get quite complex as well. So if I went to, say, a customer's view, and I wanted to load this stuff, so I can just design layout here, put it underneath. But this time I want to add multiple views at the bottom, so I can create a tab group here. Okay, and we'll rename this first one to be contacts. And then we can add another tab after that, and we'll call that addresses. Okay, so in this one, I'm actually going to add my delivery contacts. So that's that one. We'll drag that into here, and we're just trying to, we'll have name, mobile number, etc. And then on my, have the address, full address. And then we might also want to bring out maybe the postcode for some filtering there, or a city, whatever you want. So use this as you like, some recent quotations, contacts, addresses, all sorts of things. And now optimize the view so that you don't have to jump in and out of the customer screen. Okay, so a few other things within the list here. So obviously we can sort by columns, multiple columns. So if you hold down the control key, you can also add sorting to additional columns. So you can see it's on my home branch and my code now, and I can keep doing that as well across there just by using the control key. Another thing that works quite well in sorting is you might want to sort by a hidden column. Maybe you want some sort of sequence on your products, with preferred products coming first. So you can add the column to your view, add the sorting, save the layout, and then remove the view as well and save the, remove the column and save the layout again. And that way you'll have sorting on a column that's not visible on the screen. Go back to my customer view now. So for customers, we've added a few useful things. So now we can view all your CRM activities straight from here. If I was on this particular element here, I might want to add that to my quick filter at the top there. So see how it's quickly put London into there for me. It's all useful ways of jumping around that customer list. Similarly, if you've got analyst, then I could actually send the selected customers across to my analyst and look at sales performance in this case. So a good example of that might be your sales order list. So in branch here to default to my currently logged in branch. Okay, so I'm just looking after my sales orders. So the way you do that is in configurator. So we've now got a thing in here we call quick filter bar settings. And if we start a new one here, saying what types it's going to be on, so it's going to be on our sales orders. And we'll make it just for me as a user for the moment. Okay. And then what we can say is, what properties in this filter bar do we want to have defaults on? So in this case, I'm going to have one on my branch. Okay. And the default value expression, I can use my expression editor here, but I happen to know that the one I want is actually our system variable called current branch. Okay. So if I just hit save on this and come out of here. So if I what you'll see now, quick filter is pre-selected to the currently logged in branch. Okay, so that's quite useful. So that could obviously be something to do with your sales rep or you as a user. It would be a useful addition there. If you did have your quick filter on here, you can actually choose on here what items you allow filtering on. But we've also added the ability to add new properties. So you can actually browse anything to do with the sales order in this case and add that as a quick filter. And one final thing on quick filters is if you get over a certain number of items, so let's say over 75 sales reps, that quick filter disappears because there's a threshold in the company settings for this. So we've now exposed that. So if you have lists that are regularly longer than that, then you can extend that threshold. But don't go too far because obviously the longer that list, if you added all your suppliers into a drop-down list, it's going to take longer to load that view. Another thing we can do is if you're experimenting with new configurations and you want to just save them but not deploy them to users, is we can now do what we call view snapshots. So within our in-tab menu here, there's now a view snapshot. Okay, so I can create a new one here. So we'll give it a name. And that's not applied to any users yet, but it's there for me to go back to, so I can go back to my snapshots here and reload that. Okay, so if I want to go back to that view and make some, and then when I'm ready, I can then save that to the role, company, or user as applicable. And what's quite good about these snapshots is they're quite easy to deploy as well. So if you go into configurator, you can actually package those up and send them maybe between your tests and live companies quite easily. Okay, and as I said, when you're ready to deploy them, just assign them to the relevant level user company role. In our webinar for ribbon commands, we looked at how we can have authorization commands so that clicking a ribbon command would actually prompt for username and password, for example. But you can actually set these up in your list for any of these commands. So in my case here, if I've left my computer logged on and there's a particularly sensitive thing I don't want people doing, like maybe deleting orders, okay, yeah, I can configure the authentication as well, just as an extra security step. So you set that up in configurator. So these are called list command execution rules. And if you look at the one I've created here, I've said it applies to sales orders. So it applies to sales order, and then what we do is we choose what command we're applying this to. So you'll see from this list here, we've got access to all of them, okay? And that could have a condition on it as well. And then you can choose whether you're going to be prompting for password, user code and password, alternative code, etc. So you've got complete control now over prompting for authorization ribbon commands as well. One other thing we added a few releases ago, if I go into my property chooser here, is on sales and purchase documents, we've added 4 useful properties. So document created on and by, and the same for last updated. So adding these to your view is actually a quicker way of accessing that information. It's quicker than pulling the same information from your audit table. So for new installations, that's something we would recommend, that you actually use those columns instead of traditional audit fields. Now, if we look at something around screen design, so if I go to my sales ribbon here, I'm doing new sales order. So one of the biggest changes for many users having these orders and other documents as a tabbed view, okay? So that's actually controlled in your settings menu at the bottom here. So if you go into settings, so we can actually choose for either adding, editing, or viewing objects, whether we're doing it tabbed, window, or dialog. So historically, most things were dialog, or lists were tab, and objects were dialog. But now you've got a bit more freedom here, so you can have multiple orders open at the same time and switch between them, for example. Okay. Also, while we're in these settings here, so a small change we made a few releases ago is if you set your size there for when it's a floating window to be 100%, it actually maximizes the window now. Previously, it just tried to scale the window to fill the screen, but now it goes into maximize mode. You can also do change default font. So maybe it's a screen you have customers looking at and you want the text a bit bigger, or maybe you've got staff with some visual impairment and struggle to read the text. You can actually change the font on this screen and then save that layout for that user or for that role. Okay, so it's quite a useful one. Now back to my order here. So I'm going through my screen. I'm entering my custom reference, picking my order type. And if you notice, it jumps straight now from my order type down to my product lines, because I'm trying to make this order input process as quick as possible. And to help do that, if I go into design mode here, what you can actually do on properties now is you can say whether there are tab stop or not. So my due date and deliver date and contact, tab stop was off, so that when I pressed return type, it just jumps straight down to the field after that with tab stop on. Okay, that's quite a good way of controlling the input process. You can also do things with labels now. So this in terms to be on the right-hand side. So we've got alignment options here, so that can be on the right-hand side. Okay. You also hyperlink on it, so that drills down in this case to my credit status. I might not want people doing that, so I can right-click into my label options and disable the drill down, or the tooltip as well if I want to on this particular element. Okay. Some of the feedback we got from other users is, if, for example, there's a validation message like that one there, sometimes people miss that because it's quite small. Okay, so what you can actually do in the company settings now is, if I go into here, message font, we can change that to be larger text. If we were a lot bigger, make it bold. Definitely won't miss this one now. And if we go back to my screen, there you go. So a bit more obvious, and you can use all sorts of gaudy colors in there if you like, but you've got complete control over that now. Okay. Another thing we can do to kind of indicate things to users, use formatting on labels now. So if I just design a layout here, I can actually, on this label here for delivered to, I can highlight elements of that text in different colors and in bold, etc. So what we have HTML formatting in your text labels. So I've added this in here, and I'll send this out to you tomorrow. But there's different tags that we support within that label. So in this case, if I went back into here and did design layout, we could, if we want to, make that italic for that F2 new bit just to emphasize it. So we just do a chevron there, I for italic, close it, and then we do like an ending tag there. So we'll slash I, and that's that. So you'll see now that that label's now got like, okay. If you want it to be really obvious, you could actually use color as well. So if I just come back here and design layout, this again, this time I've got this in my clipboard because I'm not going to type that in. So now I've actually got background color and a foreground as part of an existing label, just to really emphasize something to my end user. Okay. So those HTML tags, we support those in any validation message rules you set up. We also support them on selection messages. So for example, if I went to my products here, the selection messages up here, we've got a heavy item message. So if we just edit that one here, so I've actually used those tags within this message. So I've got my size being larger, I've got bold as well within here. Okay, just while we're on this screen as well, by the way, we've added start and end dates. Okay, so you want a range, and when that selection message pops up, you can have that. So now when I actually select that, okay, I'm going to get that pop-up message like that. Okay, so just to emphasize that text within that message. Screens as well now, as we can control what elements appear in drop-down lists. So, for example, in my product list here, I might only support 2 or 3 different product types. So I can get rid of all those other options just to make the input process easier and to stop people creating a mistake of the wrong type. So if we just edit this one again, and if we and I have choices. So in my case, I might just say we can only do standard or text products. Okay, so that's just a character term between each element, many in there as you like. New product, and we drop down my type selection here. I've only got those 2 elements. Okay, so you can use that on any of those drop down fields throughout IQ. So it's quite useful, as I said, to control that input for people as well. Okay, so let's look at some things in particular around order processing. So if I go back to my sales order here, and one of the things I've done in here as well is I showed you grouping of commands within a sales order list. You can also do this within your items list as well. So my item commands here are grouped into various sections to make the selection process easier. And again, you can use that priority to decide which items appear at the bottom, which ones go into your overflow menu. So you've got complete control over that. We've also added in recent times the ability to move lines up and down. So this is a multi-line order. I can move these up and down quite easily, which is quite useful. Okay, so we just add another couple of products here just to illustrate the point. Okay, so I've got a few products there, so I can move those up and down. That's all fine. Another thing that people can do that they probably don't realize is you can actually use the insert key here as well. So if I wanted a line in the middle, I can just press insert. That's in there for me to pick another product. So that's another way of getting things in the right sequence. That's quite useful. You'll see on my view as well that I've actually got, let's get rid of that line. I've actually got multiple tabs here. Now, what I've done in my input screen is I've tried to minimize input, and I've discouraged things like negotiation. So I'm not inviting people to type in a net price, for example. But obviously they do need to do that sometimes. So if you wanted to open up more fields, you could have a second tab. So this first one's all about getting things in quickly. If they want to, then go to the second tab now, and you can see I've opened up more fields for things like discount, or you could use the haggle screen for things like this as well. So just like I customized my main list view, you could customize this view and add a grouping command, tab groups in here, and then add items grid again within each tab. Okay, so you've got that layout. This example as well in the end is an interesting one. So we had a customer with a trade counter environment with a little store at the back. They want to be able to print a little ticket off to go and collect some goods from the store, but don't want to save the order at this stage. So all we did was we put the basic information they wanted in one of these grids, and from this grid then they can just do list, print, or preview. Okay, so that let them get the little ticket out to go and collect their goods without having to save the order and go through the normal order reporting process. Another thing we can do is add sections to orders now. So if I go to my sections section, we can type in sections here. So I'll have first fix, second fix. And then if I go to my line detail here, you can see we've actually got section within here. So now I can actually allocate each of these lines to various sections within this document. Okay, so that's a quite quick way of categorizing those lines within order. If you track lost sales within IQ, there's a way you can switch on tracking those lost sales from deleting order lines, for example. So if I delete this order line here, it's going to pop up for me and say, do you want to generate a lost sale? Okay, so I'll say yes. So I want to know why people are canceling lines. And you can pick a reason just through normal configuration. You can choose what they are. But we've also added as part of this ability to record competitors. So you can actually store a list of competitors. So if you want to analyze why people are taking their business elsewhere, you can now record that at point of sale. Also, sometimes you're losing sales because you don't stock items or not on your product file. So we can also do what's called a lost sale other, okay, which if I do that one here, that lets me type in a description, okay, so I could not pick, and I can type in my description there. So you'd analyze that, on a text basis and try and see what people are coming in to ask for that you don't stock, and then you can refine your product file. A couple of things while I'm in here. So recently we added the ability to have multiple text to items. Previously you can only have one per object type, so now you can have multiple. So sometimes they might be, in this case, comma delimited or tab delimited, but some people might have different sets of data you bring in from different sources with different numbers of fields. So you can have as many of these as you like now within here. From a pricing point of view, there's various things we've added. So firstly, if I go to my company settings here, the global price list. So if I search for sales document customer price list, okay, so you can actually create what you might call a catch-all price list. So maybe sort of global promotions you might have across the whole business, and that can be set on there. And when we evaluate pricing on an order line, it will take obviously the between what's in there and any other prices on the customer. Some other things we've done within pricing as well. So if I look at my delivery contact here, okay, and we just edit it, we've actually added a on delivery contact as well. So now you can have site-specific price lists if you want to. And if I edit my this one here is your standard price list field. I've just renamed this to customer specific price list. But you can also have additional price lists now. So if you want to kind of keep separate sets of pricing grouped together and apply those where appropriate, you can do, and then keep this one kind of pure to the pure terms that are for that customer only. Okay, so that's why I've called mine customer specific price list. So there's no confusion as to what's applying to who. As part of this as well, if I just edit this price list, we can all have branches on a price list. So this might apply to only certain branches within your organization. And then the final thing in this area is, whilst I've said mine is customer specific, we don't actually enforce that. So I could pick that price list for somebody else by accident. So now within company settings, we do actually have the ability to control that. So if I go into my company settings, creation. So that's kind of the classic approach. You just manually maintain that within a customer, but now you can have some automatically created when you create your customer, but they're still not enforced. So I tend to prefer this strict one now, where a price list is assigned to that customer and no other customer can choose that price list. Okay, so you're guaranteed that that's only their terms within that price list. A few other things within creating this, then we've added useful commands like reset selling price or reset all selling price if you want to restore the whole order to its default pricing. Some things around linear items. So if I just add in one of my timber items, for example, so you'll see on mine now, I've actually got all my lengths pre-populated. So there's a new company setting, which I'll send you tomorrow, which lets you control that. And that means it's much quicker for you just to come down and say, I want 2 of those, 3 of these, without having to specify the length. So that's quite useful. The other thing you can do here is put the length specification in the grid if you want. So if you go to add columns, length allocation, linear length allocation, and choose within here a field called linear tally. Okay, if I just make this bigger, I can actually key into here now what lengths I want. Okay, so as a shorthand, I can say 2 lengths, 3 meter long. Okay, or I could have a comma there and say 3.6. Okay, if you try and put something there that's invalid, it will tell you and won't let you do it. So we'll have 3 at 3.7. So that's not a valid length. And you can see that large message font really works in that scenario. It's much more obvious. I might actually leave that on. Okay, so that's a couple of things around linear items within orders as well. So around quotations then, a couple of little tweaks around here. So if I do a new sales order, I'll just pick a different customer this time. I'll make that deliver collect later sale. So now I can pick my product on here. Okay, so some of you will be used to this message where it pops up and says active sales quotations exist for this product. So that's okay, but you can't really do anything from here. So we've actually had an option to make that a bit more useful. So if you go into your company settings again, and if we search for handling, oops, if I could type. So handling of product exists on a customer quotation. I'm going to now change that to say show list. Okay, so we'll save that. If we add the same product again, this time I get so to show all my quotes that are there on the system for that product and customer. What's quite nice here is I can actually pick up one of those or 2 of those, whatever I want to do, and that'll pick up any of the pricing that's on that quotation for me. Okay. Within a quotation itself, just a small thing we've changed is you can now have sales order type. So if you use things like collected or delivered pricing, you might want that to kick in at your quotation stage as well. So I could pick my sales order type here, And then when I convert this, hopefully, to an order, that will then pick up that same type as you go forward. Okay, so a few other bits and pieces then. If I go into, say, I don't know, my vehicles list here, and we edit one of these, this is one of my favorite changes of late. So historically in IQ, you had to move off a field before you could save it. Okay, so there's now an option within the company settings to decide when that that save command becomes available. So I've got mine set to, as soon as I change an object, so I don't have to come off that field for my save to be enabled. It actually makes input much quicker. Give it a try, and I think you might like it. Okay. We can also have on customers things like alternative reference masks now. So if I go into my customer, so your customer might have particular reference formats. So if you go down to your smart part for alternate references, so there might be a very specific job reference they have. So they might say, PO 325256 is a specific reference that we allow. Okay, or they might actually have, a kind of pattern, maybe one character followed by 5 numbers. So if I just paste this in here, so what I'm actually saying here is the first character can be anything between A and Z, and then this notation afterwards indicates that I can then have 5 digits. Okay, so that's what the D5 means. All right, and if we just test those with this little screen, you can say, does that match? No, nothing pops up. Does PO 3256 match? Yes. And does one character followed by 5 digits match? 5 characters, and that's fine. So that matches on that reference. Okay. And then when I save that on my order, and if I try and go past my customer reference field, it's going to tell me I need to enter it using one of their alternate reference masks. With products, so if we look at my product list here, the product code is the product code as the image file name. But there's now options within the company build. So if you search for, just search for image in here. Okay, so we actually choose the product image naming source, so it can be product code or default supplier product code, or even a product property. Now when you choose product property, I can choose then which property I'm going to use. So it could be manufacturer's code, and then your product file name will be manufacturer's code.jpg, depending on the file type. Within the users list, some people spotted this in a previous presentation to see who's logged in. Okay, so it's just some today. Obviously, you'll be able to see all your users there if you're using IQ in your production environment. Groups as well. So if I go to my branches here, we've got a branch group, which is quite nice for kind of analysis and grouping of branches. But we can also use it to control access as well. So if you go into your user settings, so if we find a user, do edit. Okay, so my branch access here is saying that default, which is really no restriction, but I can restrict this to just my branch, my default branch, or I can restrict it, the branch that I see, to all the branches in the group of my default branch. A bit mouthful. Okay, and then the other thing you can do within this is, in a product where you've got your branch info and you've got a list of all your branches within a product, you can apply that restriction within here using the same options as well. So somebody might be restricted in terms of what branch info they can edit on a product using this one as well. So that's how we can use the branch access within here, or the branch groups within here. A couple of things we've added and changed within users. So if I just edit this one, option now to disable accounts. If you've got somebody leaving, you can choose when that account becomes disabled using that option there. And we can also, if somebody's forgotten the password, we can force a change next time they log in. Okay, so just little things just help that user management within IQ. So with linear items, you've got the linear parent and then the components within them. But the components, you can't edit those. Everything's done at that top level. And that was presenting a challenge because sometimes things like your stock levels and some of the branch options within those components vary. So now within a product, if I edit this one here, or linear product, now so I can actually edit the branch information, okay, for this linear component. So I can just go down this list now and vary things like min and max stock levels. I can do the same at stock bin level, and I can also update some of my replenishment details within here as well. So it's much easier now to manage all your linear components from within the parent using these new options. So let's get rid of all that. Okay, some things on control desk then. So let's just load up my control desks again. Okay, so in recent times, we've added an image local file now, but I do pick that from your network or some internet location. So if we hit OK, etc. But it's very easy now to brand that control desk within IQ as well. Many of you as well, there's a couple of charts on here. So many of you will have these animators. So something we added quite a while ago now actually is the ability to switch off chart animation. So whilst the animation might look pretty, it does actually slow down loading up your control desks. So you'll have a faster user experience if you disable that chart animation within here. We've also added the ability to copy widgets in various ways. So if I go into here, if I hit this copy option, what you do is you get a little copy option on every widget. So clicking that will create another instance. See that at the bottom of that widget. And if I go now into design mode, I can pick, and that's just a copy, and I can change the properties as I wish. Okay. The other thing we've added, which is possibly more useful, is copy from. So if there's kind of common widgets across different control desks, so now I can actually choose another control desk here, and then choose if I want to copy over from that control desk into this one, and they'll just drop at the bottom again, and then we just pull them into place like I did before. So they're quite useful. Let's get rid of that. A few releases ago, we added the ability to have drill down on charts. Okay, so it means that I could actually click on this bar and drill down to quotations for this sales rep. So I'll just spend a minute showing you how you do this because it's quite useful. So I'll go into design mode, and what I'll do is I'll start from scratch. Okay, so we'll just delete all these. Okay, and I'm going to add now a new widget type bar chart, and we'll just drop that in place there. So now we'll go into design mode or configure mode. And for this bar chart then, so a little bit of, I use these at the same time. So this is going to be active quotations. And in this case, it's going to be sales quotation. Okay. And my value property is going to be my net amount less discount base. Okay. So I'll stick to base currencies if you can for these sort of things. And then I'm going to summarize this by the sales rep. So sales rep, and then we'll do it by their code. Okay. That's all you need to do to get of quotations by sales rep. So now I want to add drill down. So if I go back into the configuration, I've got a tab on here. Now with all these things, if you're on the right version, so I'll send you all the details of the versions tomorrow. If you're on the right version, if you don't see the field that I'm setting here, just go into design layout on your screen and just make sure that it's on there, or add it back on if it's been removed or is never there. So drill down type, I'm just going to show a list of matching objects, and this time it's going to be sales quotations. Okay, and in the condition now, this is where the drill down happens, or the linking of the drill down. So I'm going to be sales rep code. Okay, and I want that to equal one of our kind of system variables, if you like. So I've toggled that input there. Oops. And if we choose this, you'll see in this mode there's a new system entry here called parameter drill down selected summary property. So basically that means it's going to use here that I've defined on the bar chart. Okay, so if I save that and I come out of configuration, now when I click this, it's going to load up my list of sales quotations. Okay, and it's filtered for Chancellor Lamb. So that's how you add drill down to charts now in IQ. And you can do the same with SQL charts. And again, I'll send you the details tomorrow. There's a different type of tag used within that situation. Okay. A couple of final ones that people won't have seen yet. So, and this includes internal staff because these are kind of fresh in this week's development cycle. So first thing we can do is if I've got an order with multiple lines, so we'll take that one there, okay, and we edit it. So we can now enable multi-select on our screens. Okay, so I've got mine switched on. So that means I can actually select multiple lines here using my shift key or using the control and shift to select individual ones. When I've got multiple ones selected, obviously I can do things like delete, which is nice, and that'll delete all those ones. I can do copy as well. So this is quite useful if you're kind of replicating things with an order, moving to different sections. You can actually copy, and it'll copy all your selections. You can also do haggle now. So normally haggle was on a single line, or you had haggle all for the whole order. So now if you do haggle in this mode, when I've got multiple selections, I'm actually setting, okay, so this is really useful. So currently it's 177, so I might say, well, you can have those 3 lines for £150, okay? And it's going to prorate price over those lines like that. And in my case, I've got a little icon indicating that I've manually priced my line. Okay, so that's super useful. That'll make managing large orders much easier. Okay, in fact, moving up and down works for this as well. So I didn't really show you moving up and down in Anger before, but you can actually move these down as a group as well. Okay, so that's really a nice feature. So if I go into my products view now, we had, column level filtering here if we want to, or we can have our quick filters, or you could press F4. The next search within the view. So if I go to design layout here, some of you may be having a mass failure on quick filter bar, but you can actually have a free text search now as well. So if we hit add here, text, I don't want to see that there. So now I've actually got embedded within the view. And in my case, I want to focus on that whenever I load the view. So I'll do that here, and then I'll save my layout. Into the view, that's there, typing. Okay, so it's a much quicker way of acting the search within any particular view. So that's what we call embedded free text search. You can add it to any list, but I wouldn't recommend it on large lists because effectively you're forcing every search into what we call the free text search, which can be slower. So don't do it on invoice views or sales order views, but things like products, customers, suppliers. It's a really nice way of having that embedded free text search within your list, and should make your experience a little bit quicker. So hopefully everybody found that really useful, and thank you for your attendance, and I'll end it and send out the video and all the details you need tomorrow. Thank you.